a surprise. He tells it straight with no disguise. Positively Pat Sims, bringing the truth, breaking it down with the critic sleuth. From big screen dramas to wrestling roars, honest reviews, you'll be begging for more. Begging for more. Begging for more. From action-packed fights to heartfelt scenes, he spills the tea on what it all means. No sugarcoat, no fluff, just the facts. Pat Sims keeps it real, cutting no slack. Positively Pat Sims, bringing the truth, breaking it down with the critic sleuth. From big screen dramas to wrestling roars, honest reviews, you'll be begging for more. He's got the charm and the boldest stance, calls it like he sees it, not a second glance. Movies or matches or something brand new, if it's worth your time, he'll tell you the Positively Pat Sims, bringing the truth, breaking it down with the critic sleuth. From big screen dramas to wrestling roars, honest reviews, you'll be begging for more. He's got the charm and the boldest stance, calls it like he sees it, not a second glance. Movies or matches or something brand new, if it's worth your time, he'll tell you the truth. Positive Pat Sims, bringing the truth, breaking it down with the critic sleuth. From big screen dramas to wrestling roars, honest reviews, you'll be begging for more. Begging for more. Begging for more.
Sims Nation, welcome to another edition of Honest Reviews with your boy right here, Positively Pat Sims. And today's very special because this is the first time we are doing Honest Reviews live, both on WANT and right here live streaming on YouTube. So it's going to be a different feel today. WANT has never gotten to experience the joy that is Honest Reviews. And we've done quite a few Honest Reviews so far here on YouTube. But it's cool. The last few weeks we've been doing this particular live stream with our Warriors Unleashed. But yesterday we did a very special episode with fellow DDPY champion and fast track coach Pam Riley, that if you didn't catch it, make sure you get over to YouTube and check it out. That episode of Warriors Unleashed, it's very, very good. I'm very happy with that one. And so because we did that last night, we thought, hey, let's bump Honest Reviews into this time slot, and let's bring you a childhood favorite, one that I haven't taken a look at in a little bit now, and that is Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, going back to 1986 with the original cast. And I'm super excited to be bringing this particular movie as our first honest review on YouTube. And, I mean, on WANT Radio, where, if you want it, we got it. So, for all of you listening on WANT, thank you for joining us wherever you are. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to jump on that live chat say hello, and give us your thoughts, your ratings, your review of our topic of the day. Again, is Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home. And I think this is probably the Star Trek film that I've watched the most in my lifetime. I think if you were to add up all the amounts of times that I've watched Star Trek films, I would have to say Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home probably gets the most views. And I'm going to say this. I think it's interesting here that it, to me, always kind of felt like the least Star Trek film of the group. There's a lot of things that we could talk about with this when it comes to this film where it just doesn't have the same feel as a lot of them. But again, I think that was kind of the point. It has a different kind of appeal to it. It really gets out there and grabs a lot of different people because the subject matter doesn't exactly feel Star Trek, but in reality, it's very Star Trek. Star Trek has always had themes that were very similar to this, and we're going to get into that. But let's give you some of just the information side of things, which is that this movie was released on November 26th, 1986. So very, very long time ago. All right. So we're talking about 40 years, 41 years almost that this movie has been out. That's incredible. That's very, very incredible. Directed by Spock himself, Leonard Nimoy, who also directed Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. The scores, not mine, but we'll find out how close I am to these scores here. IMDb rates it as a 7.3, with Rotten Tomatoes giving it an 81%, and Metacritic coming in at a 71%. So not great scores, but good. Very, very good. And the box office for this film, $133 million worldwide, $109.7 million domestic here in the United States, and there's a lot of talk, worldwide nowadays because the worldwide market for films has become a much bigger deal. Back in 1986, as you could see, not so much. We're looking at maybe another 20 million international, whereas a movie like this, if you're getting 109 million here in the United States, you would expect that number to be not a lot more than 20 million. Let's put it that way. This is the first Star Trek film. Little fun fact here: first Star Trek film to cross the 100 million mark in the United States. It is the top grossing Star Trek film until 2009's Star Trek reboot. So that's very interesting that you have Star Trek the motion picture, you've got Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan, which many people cite as being like the best Star Trek film ever. You have Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. Then you get Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, which, it's weird to think that Star Trek 4 is the highest grossing after the film that it followed. All right? And I always try to find something to enjoy about everything that I watch. And Star Trek 1 is quite boring for the most part. A lot of people go into Star Trek hoping for Star Wars. And it's not. Star Trek and Star Wars are two completely different things. And the fans of Star Trek know that and are well aware of that. And so Star Trek 1, if you're a Star Trek fan and you know what you're getting into, might not be that bad of a movie for you. And then we get Star Trek 2, and Star Trek 2 takes things to another level. It does bring in a little bit more action. It's a better paced film. It's got a great villain. everything's right there. And then you go to Star Trek 3, and Christopher Lloyd is a Klingon captain with his crew in a bird of prey, hunting down Kirk, who's trying to get to the Genesis planet because he's trying to save Spock, who he's been informed is not really gone. That Spock is still with us somehow, and he transferred his spirit, whatever, to McCoy. So now it's a race to save Spock, but it just didn't feel like that good of a movie. And it was kind of a, I don't know, kind of a slog. And a lot of people will tell you, like, the even number films in Star Wars are the good ones. 2, 4, 6. 1, 3, 5. A lot of people don't like them. I actually enjoy 5. I find, like I said, I try to find something to enjoy about everything that I see. But this one picks up immediately where 3 leaves off. So we have Spock, who's been rescued by Kirk and his crew. He's got his spirit within him now. McCoy's good to go. And we jump into this film with something kind of crazy, but it does pick up right after the events. And we'll get into that in just a second. But let me get through the cast really quickly. It is the original cast with a couple of other people thrown in. You've got William Shatner as not Captain Kirk, Admiral Kirk, but we'll talk about that. Leonard Nimoy, of course, as Spock. DeForest Kelley as McCoy. James Doohan as Scotty. George Takei as Sulu. Walter Koenig as Chekhov. Nichelle Nichols as Uhura. Catherine Hicks joins the cast as Jillian. And Robin Curtis reprises her role that she replaced Kirstie Alley in Star Trek 3 as she plays Lieutenant Savick and plays a very small role. Is basically there as almost a cameo just to say something nice about Kirk's son who died in Star Trek 3. And that's your cast. All right, now there's a lot of little bit parts here and there, but let's jump into this plot. What is this movie? Well, we find out that there's this probe that has been sent from somewhere out in deep space, and it's letting out this frequency, this signal, that is damaging all the electrical equipment and stuff from any nearby starship. And we see this first ship get affected. Now, the kind of disturbing thing about this is they're using emergency power, and you're wondering how long is all of this taking? Are we seeing the end of these crews as this probe is making its way towards Earth? And during this time, we see the destructive capabilities of the probe, which is basically this long-looking tube with a little brain and a little ball around the bottom of it. And we then cut to the Klingons putting up a presentation that shows scenes from Star Trek 3 where the Klingons are on the Enterprise and Kirk and his crew has already left, setting off the self-destruct, destroying the Enterprise, killing all the Klingons that were on the ship. And the Klingons are complaining about Kirk and everything like that, and Starfleet says, he's been charged with 9 violations of Starfleet regulations, and the Klingons are ticked off, and Spock's father comes in to kind of speak for the accused because they're not there, and that's basically the Klingons are ticked off, which will play off in later films, and we're just awaiting the crew of the Enterprise to get back and face the music, come back and face their trial. But they're on Vulcan still, and they have their bird of prey that they got from defeating the Klingons in 3. No Enterprise in this film. Again, one of those things that makes it feel a little less Star Trek. as the crew's going to be flying a bird of prey that they apparently completely redesigned to more match what the Enterprise looked like. Because when you watch 3 and you see the inside of the bird of prey, the Klingon bird of prey, it looks nothing like what you see in 4. So it's a completely remade version of the bird of prey. And it kind of changes every time you see a bird of prey. It looks a little bit different than it did the time before. There's also a lot of questions as to the size of the bird of prey. How big is it really? Are there different sizes of the bird of prey, or are they all big enough to do what this one is going to do later on in the film? But so they decide they're all going to go back and they're going to face the judge and jury, because in the third one they had to disobey orders. They had to do all these things that are against the rules to go rescue Spock. So they decide, since we did that for him, we accomplished our mission, let's go back, let's face it. And so they get everything ready, and Spock is trying to come to terms with his reprogramming, if you will, and reminded that he's half human. So one of the big things is the computer asks him, how do you feel? And Spock's like, I don't understand the question. It's irrelevant. And his mom tries to explain to him, like, it's part of who you are. And it does come back into play a little bit later on at the end of the film. But as the Enterprise is making the crew of the Enterprise, which is flying the bird of prey, is making their way back to Earth, the probe is doing even more damage. It's now made it to Earth. It's targeting the oceans. It's destroying communications. Spaceports are down. They send out an emergency message. The crew gets it. They see that Earth's in trouble, and they Spock figures out that this is the probe is putting out a signal that underwater sounds like the song of a humpback whale. Now, in the 23rd century, humpback whales are extinct, and so they can't answer the message. That's why the probe was sent. So they come up with this idea that they're going to go to light speed, slingshot around the sun, putting them into time travel, go back to the late 1900s, get some humpback whales, and bring them back to the future. Okay. Now, I don't know if they ever explained this on the show or something, but there was no explanation as to how this all works, right? And why. Why does this work? Like in Back to the Future, they kind of walked us through the procedure here, and it's still like you kind of just have to suspend disbelief about it. But in this one, it was just like, yeah, we're going to slingshot around the sun. You're in time travel. Like it's nothing. Like it's just a thing. And Kirk even says, we've done it before. And I wasn't a big fan of the original show. I haven't seen much of it. So I had no idea what they're talking about. So I don't know how that works. I don't know how the time travel thing works. That always kind of bothered me a little bit. But, I mean, they do it. They travel back in time. And once they get into that time travel thing and they're warping back in time, the funny part is the movie essentially gives away the rest of the film. It gives away the plot of the rest of the film and what's about to happen. And if you watch it a second time, you realize that's what's happening. You might forget what you're hearing as you go through the film. But in that scene, you hear, Scotty saying, Admiral, there'll be whales here. And then all these different things that you might just kind of pass off. But then you realize you're hearing things that are going to happen later in the film. And they arrive in San Francisco in the late 1980s. So it's supposed to be present day. And it's very, very interesting at this point, because now the movie takes on a whole different vibe and a different feel, which is exactly what you need for this movie. You can't have this feel like any other Star Trek film because you're not in the future anymore. You're not dealing with aliens, apart from Spock. you're dealing with present day and people who don't understand the technology of a bird of prey, cloaking, and all this stuff. So Spock he rips part of his robe off to cover up his ears, and they don't understand why they're using all this colorful language, and they don't have any money. They got to figure out how to get money, and it's pretty fun to watch. And one of my little notes that I had here is because of all of this, the movie is not as much of a story like you would normally see, where Kirk really and Spock and McCoy, your main three, really take over. McCoy kind of takes a step back after playing a huge role in Star Trek 3. Spock and Kirk definitely are your leads. However, everybody gets something to do. Scotty gets to go off, and so the mission basically is, they're getting these humpback whales, right? But they have to make the bird of prey ready to go. They also have to find a power source to charge these crystals, these Klingon crystals. And the only way they can do that is with nuclear power. So they have to figure all this stuff out, right? So everybody's got a mission. Sulu's basically, his job is to go learn how to fly a helicopter. Get a helicopter, learn to fly it so he can help him do stuff. You've got Chekhov and Uhura, who are supposed to find the nuclear vessels, which Chekhov very, entertainingly calls nuclear vessels. And they're supposed to go find that, collect the nuclear energy. You've got Scotty and Bones are going off to get the glass that they need in order to create this tank for the humpback whales. And the way that they get it from the guy is by giving him the formula to create transparent aluminum. All right, so and I remember it's a great moment where Bones is like, how do we know that by giving him the formula we're not altering the future? And he's like, why? How do we know he didn't invent the thing? Which you'd think that would be something you would hopefully want to know before you gave a guy the thing. Or it depends on your idea of how time travel works. Does time travel was you going back affect your future? Or does you going back just become the normal? That's always how it's been, right? It's time, no matter what happens, whether you go back for whatever, time is still looping around and the same things are happening every time. So it just depends on your viewpoint of what traveling through time is like, right? So, but everybody gets something to do. While Kirk and Spock look for the whales, try to figure out where they're going to be and when they're going to be there so that they can, and all of it has to come together as one. And they meet Jillian. Jillian works at this institute where she's very close to these whales. She looks at them as like friends. Like she treats them like they're her friends, and she's very close with them. And at one point, Spock decides to jump in to the aquarium and swim with George and Gracie, the humpbacks, and he does his Vulcan mind meld, and he gets information, and he finds out that Gracie's pregnant and all this stuff. And there's a lot of little things happening here and there, but it's just a lot of fun. And we go on this little side quest at one point, which is very interesting because you're kind of rolling with the whale thing, but then it does kind of feel like without this side quest, the movie's very short. And so what happens is, so Chekhov and Uhura find the Enterprise, which is a big ship, your nuclear vessel, and he's all excited to tell Kirk it's the Enterprise. They go onto this ship, and because of all the radiation and everything that's in the ship itself, they collect the energy. However, Scotty is having trouble beaming them out, so he gets Uhura out, but he can't get Chekhov out. So Chekhov has to try to get out of there himself. He falls, he hurts himself, and he gets taken to the hospital. And this is where, again, like, this could be taken very seriously. This could be treated like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Bones needs to come in and save the day, which he does. He gets to come in and do his thing. But there's a lot of comedy here. There's a lot of lighthearted humor when it comes to, like, the way Bones is complaining, McCoy is complaining about everything. Like, are we in the dark ages? This lady's like, I have kidney dialysis. And he gives her a pill, and he's like, here, take this. And then he goes in there, and he's like, we need to do this. And he's just taking over everything because he has such a low appreciation for anything these doctors are doing because they're so, behind the times. And it is for him, if you think about it, in the 23rd century, coming back to 1986, that is like going back to like the Stone Age for him. That's like going back to the medieval times for us. So it's understandable. And one of the funniest moments is as they're running away with Chekhov trying to get out of there. The old lady he gave the pill to is just joyfully saying to everybody, "Doctor gave me a pill, I grew a new kidney. Doctor gave me a pill, I grew a new kidney." And it was so funny. Just absolutely hilarious. And they get back to the bird of prey, and Jillian decides that she needs to go with them because who in the 23rd century is going to know how to take care of these animals, and she needs to go to instruct them. She's close to them. So now the adventure begins to go get these whales, who were released early, by the way. They were supposed to be released a certain day. They were released like a day early or something like that. And immediately the crew comes upon a whale hunter, a ship that's hunting whales, automatically putting George and Gracie in peril. What would you expect? All right, so this is where we get some tension here, but it also gives us a really cool moment that you saw, and I'll show you again from our welcome screen right here. So there's the ship. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see that. Sorry, WANT, but the ship fires a harpoon, and it hits nothing because the bird of prey can cloak. And then it uncloaks, showing the gigantic ship, and the crew of the boat freak out. They turn around, and now Scotty beams the whales into the bird of prey, and they successfully do that, which of course is where we get the Admiral, there'll be whales here. And now they got to get back. But they're doing so not with a fully functioning ship. They're doing so with a ship that has a whole lot more weight to it, that has crystals that have been recharged to a certain capacity. So Spock has to figure out all of the stuff to make it work, and he says, I'll make my best guess. And it, again, gives us a great line where Kirk's like, Spock, that's great. That's fantastic. And Spock doesn't get it. McCoy says he feels better about your guesses than most people's facts. And again, there's a lot of really good character building in this movie. There's a lot of good back and forth, remembering that these people, at least in this world, care about each other. They're friends. They are they're more than just co-workers. They're friends. They really do care. Now, outside of the show and outside of this world, we all know there were plenty of tensions and everything like that, but we're not here to get into any of that. So the crew does their little slingshot again, which I don't know how it works. How do you know whether you're going back or forward by slingshotting around the sun? But they do it all again. They end up right back where they started from. So they're successful. So that's a nice break for the Enterprise there. And they come around. They go back to Earth. And, of course, the probe is still doing its thing, so the bird of prey loses power. There's, again, some tension building there because the whales are stuck in the bird of prey. They have to go manually open it, so Kirk has to go save the day. And they're all outside in the rain in the middle of the ocean, waiting for these whales to come out and respond, which takes a little bit. But when they do, the whales and the probe kind of mimic each other. And then the probe, the little brain ball at the bottom, comes up into the big tube part, and it leaves. And as it leaves, everything comes back on. Anything that it affected goes back to the way it was. So we're hoping that all the ships that it affected on the way to Earth, because it was a long trip, everyone's fine. Everyone's good, right? So that's pretty much it. They go to their little trial thing there. Spock stands with his comrades, and basically because they saved the world, pretty much everything's forgiven except for Kirk disobeying a direct order from a superior. And because of that, he is stripped of his rank of admiral and he is made captain. However, because of everything that they did, Kirk is going to be the captain of his crew with a new starship. And it's a really cool moment when we get to see the crew heading there, and they're wondering what ship they're going to get. Are we going to get the Excelsior? Are we going to get this? And Kirk's like, just be happy we have a ship, you know. And they come up over, and there it is, the NCC 1701B, which is basically looks exactly like the 1701A. But we will find out in the next film that it is kind of a hunk of junk. There's a lot of problems with this ship that gives us a lot of humor in Star Trek V with Scotty. So that's basically your plot of Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. Nothing really too complex here. Again, most of the joy of this film and the fun of this film is them interacting with people from our time period and them adjusting, talking about bad language they refer to as colorful metaphors. There's a punk rocker on a bus at one point, and he flips them off because he's playing his loud music, and Kirk tells him to turn it down. And so Spock gives him that nerve pinch and knocks him out. You know, there's just a lot of little fun things like that that's bringing the Star Trek world into our current time period, or at least the time period of that time, you know, the 80s. So it's a fun film. It's a very, very fun film. The effects of this film, there's not a whole lot of effects in comparison to other entries of Star Trek, because there really isn't a big need for a lot of special effects. There are some. The Bird of Prey looks really good. It looks like a Star Trek film, okay? It doesn't look like a Star Wars film. Again, you shouldn't expect it to. Star Wars is different. I think Star Wars always had a much bigger budget, except for maybe the first one. But Star Wars was a massive global phenomenon. So they made a lot more money. Thus, they're going to get more money to make sequels. Whereas Star Trek, as we said, this is the first film to cross $100 million at the box office and was the only one to do so until 2009 when they rebooted the franchise. So it's hard to imagine getting Star Wars type of effects on a very small budget, which I believe for this film was right around $25 million for this film. So which is, I think a lot of people would be shocked to hear that. Like, wait, Star Trek, they only gave them 25, even for 1986, they only gave them 25 million? Yeah. That's about it. But for what they had to work with and what they did, I thought the effects were fine. I don't really have any complaints about it. I try to look at movies as they are and not how they should be by today's standards. I try to remember, like, hey, this is a 1986 film. Don't be too harsh on it. But I thought it was fine. I really didn't have any real complaints about it. Some of the other talking points I have here, one of the things that does affect this film for me is I got a big appreciation for the Bird of Prey. Now, the Bird of Prey makes appearances in 3, 4, and 5, and 6. It plays a huge part in all 4 of those films. But it really takes center stage here because there is a lack of the USS Enterprise. And that did take away some of that Star Trek feel because the Enterprise was it's just such a big part of Star Trek. It's strange to imagine that we got 1 minute of shots of the Enterprise at the beginning of the film getting blown up, and then we see it at the tail end of the film for another minute, and that's it. That's all we get of the Enterprise. Now, I'm not complaining really about it. It's just kind of a thing where if you're expecting to see the crew and you're expecting to see the Enterprise because you don't know what you're expecting from this film, just be aware this is a Bird of Prey movie, not an Enterprise movie. All right? And it works because the Enterprise can't cloak. The Enterprise can't hide like the Bird of Prey would. The use of the Bird of Prey, like I said, is very, very well done. This is what they have to work with. And, again, if you had the Enterprise, it's a different film because the Enterprise would mean that you would leave it out in space and everybody would be beaming down. Everything would be done by beaming, whereas the Bird of Prey, you have the problem of the Klingon crystals. You have the cloaking so that it can literally hide right out in the open. So there's a lot of advantages to this movie using the Bird of Prey as opposed to the Enterprise. All right. I've talked about the time travel, and it doesn't take me out of the movie. I'll be honest. It's only when you're like thinking about it later where you're like, how the heck does that work? Right? Like, I don't feel like I should have to go back and find the episode that supposedly, I guess they might have time traveled on the original series. I don't know. I was never a huge fan of the original series. But it's like, do I have to do that to understand how this all works? Because it just kind of like doesn't make sense to me. How does slingshotting around the sun make you go back in time and then slingshot around again brings you forward in time? I just didn't understand how that worked, right? There was no, they didn't walk us through any part of that. And maybe that's good because maybe they didn't even know either. Maybe they had no clue how this all worked and they're just like, here, just live with it, right? I don't know. Who knows? This movie definitely had crossover appeal. And by that, I mean that Star Trek fans very much liked the film. But the film didn't cater to Star Trek fans. The film opened itself up to people that weren't necessarily Star Trek fans. And thus, that's why I believe it was the most successful financially of all the Star Trek films up until J.J. Abrams rebooted it in 2009. It doesn't have that Star Trek feel to it from beginning to end. It has a whole life of its own. And Leonard Nimoy did a fantastic job in the director's chair with this film. And I will be honest, it won me over before any of the other Star Trek films did when I was a kid. This movie came out when I was 6 years old. November, I would have been 6. And I think the first time I saw it would have been 7 when, or maybe 6 still, when I got to see it on VHS. And I really, really liked it. And because of it, I ended up wanting to see the other films. I ended up wanting to go back and watch Star Trek The Motion Picture, Star Trek II The Wrath of Khan, The Search for Spock. When 5 came out, we rushed to the theater to see it. That was all because 4 was as good as it was. So without Star Trek 4, I don't think I'm much of a Star Trek fan. And I very much enjoy Star Trek. I don't have anything visible here to show that. You can see Star Wars, you can see comic books and characters and wrestling. But Star Trek stuff I do have. And in fact, I have the USS Enterprise, and I have multiple Birds of Prey. And I do have a small Star Trek collection. I have a Kirk figure. I have a Spock figure. So I without 4, The Voyage Home, I'm not a Star Trek fan. I mean, at least not the way that I am now. I probably would have gotten into it at some point, but to be a fan for almost 40 years of my life because of one movie, that's pretty cool. All right, it's time to give you guys what you've been waiting for, our final scores here. And what we do here on Honest Reviews is we give you a score between 1 and 10 or 0 and 10, depending on the film. Our letter grade, as if we're grading it in school, and then our recommendation. So if someone were to come up to me and say, I've never seen Star Trek 4, what do you think? What would I say? What would my response be? And here it is, right here. So my final score out of 10 possible points, I give Star Trek 4 The Voyage Home a nice, good 7.5. So my score is a bit higher than Internet Movie Database, IMDb. On a letter grade, it gets a B- from me. And it was a tough call. Do I just go straight B, or do I go the B- route? I think for me, the 7.5 and a B-, I think that's fair. I think it's good, but I don't think it's great. I think that it's a good comedy. Is it a good science fiction action type of thing? No, but it's not on the same level as Star Trek 2. I actually find a lot more fun to be had in terms of action and everything like that. Like Star Trek 6 is a lot of fun in that regard. There's a lot more intrigue and a lot more mystery. And like I said, this feels a little bit more like science fiction comedy than anything else. But it's also giving you a bit of a morality play here. It's warning us about the dangers of these whales going extinct and how if we're not careful, we could be the cause of our own extinction in the future, because who knows how all of these things connect, right? So there's a message in this movie that's very, very clear. There's not a hidden message in this one. It's right out in the open. But if someone were to come to me and say, hey, Pat, I've never seen Star Trek 4. What do you think? My recommendation is basically this. It's a must-see for Star Trek fans for sure. All right, if you're a Star Trek fan, it's a must. It has great comedic adventure showing future space explorers in the late 1900s San Francisco. It's a character-driven story for each of the main cast members. The only downside for me is I like Star Trek and Star Wars. I like when there's a villain, and here your villain is basically man. So there's stakes, but there really isn't a bad guy. The probe isn't trying to destroy humanity on purpose. It's trying to communicate. So it's not a bad guy. It's not a villain. So there's no villain, which makes the film a little bit lighter. It's a little bit more fun. It's not, for me, the best film in the series, but it is the one that got a lot of kids my age, such as myself, into Star Trek who hadn't before. So that's my review, my honest review of Star Trek 4 in a nutshell. I like the music. That's something we didn't really talk about. I thought the music was actually pretty good, but the one thing about Star Trek that bothers me is that there's different music in multiple films. Like the only main theme you ever hear is that dun 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 dun. That's it. It's the only one that's consistent between the films. but otherwise you have a different main theme. The only one that I really, really like that I'll listen to at any point, and they used it for Star Trek The Next Generation, is the one by, I believe it's Jerry Goldsmith, who did the music for Star Trek The Motion Picture and Star Trek V. Star Trek 4 is a distant second. It's good, but it just does not compare to 1 and 5 in terms of the music and the theme that we get. Star Trek 2 is a great film, but it just doesn't have the same weight with the music, right? 3, again, like I couldn't even tell you what the music was for 3. 6, I can't even tell you what the music is for 6. But Star Trek The Next Generation uses the same themes from Star Trek 1 and Star Trek 5, and I think it's done for a reason because it's that good. All right, but Star Trek 4 is probably number 2 on the list until we get to the reboots, and the reboots do have a bit more of a consistency between the 3 films, but even then there's not really much of a theme to speak of, and nothing on the level of what Jerry Goldsmith did for 1 and 5. I think if you look up Life's a Dream, something like that, from Star Trek 5, you'll hear exactly what I'm talking about. Go on Apple Music, Spotify, look up Star Trek 5, I believe it's Life's a Dream, and play that, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It's really, really good. So that's it, guys. The one thing I want to leave you with is, again, if you missed yesterday's Warriors Unleashed and you're looking for a little bit of inspiration, because let's face it, it's been a rough week for a lot of people, and it might be a rough month for you. It might be a rough year for you. You're looking for a little bit of inspiration, a little motivation. You're trying to do something positive with your life. Tune in and check out Warriors Unleashed. Yesterday was with fellow DDPY champion and fast track coach Pam Riley, as we talked about how our setbacks can become great comebacks. And tomorrow from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern, right here on YouTube and live on WANT, we are bringing you, of course, our main show, the Positively Pat Sims Show. And on that one, my buddy Ashton's going to be joining us again, as we're going to be talking about some of the greatest, biggest, most memorable sports moments of all time. And I'm going to bet most of them are going to be the ones that I wrote down, because I have like 2 pages of moments. And so we're probably going to rely on my history remembering abilities for sports. And I'll be fair, a lot of them are baseball. There's a lot of baseball. I'm a huge baseball fan, but we've got baseball, basketball, football, even pro athletes and professional wrestling, and we got other golf, boxing, and all kinds of good stuff here. So make sure you join us tomorrow for the Positively Pat Sims Show. Remember, when we're done here, you can rewatch any of our programs on the Positively Pat Sims YouTube channel. And every Monday, we release all the previous week's shows in an audio-only version for you to listen to anywhere at any time on Spotify. So head on over to Spotify. You can look up Positively Pat Sims. I have my comedy album that's still out on Spotify and Apple Music and all those fun things. And we also have all 3 of our shows that are available for you to listen to at any time. So if you can watch us here on YouTube, or you can listen to us on Spotify. So there's no excuse not to check out the Positively Pat Sims lineup, whether it be on WANT, Spotify, or right here on YouTube. Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining us. I very much enjoy doing these honest reviews. I hope you do too. Make sure you head on over to positivelypatsims.printful.me today. Pick up your honest review t-shirt. There's a whole bunch of other products we got right now on there, and it's first 100 orders, and we had one just the other day where they ordered a brand new cell phone case for their Samsung S25, and they got a very special personal gift from me, Positively Pat Sims. So the next 99 orders get a very special personalized message and gift from me, Positively Pat Sims. So get on over there today. Order your Positively Pat Sims merch, honest reviews, Warriors Unleashed, and the Positively Pat Sims show. We got all kinds of stuff. Purses, teddy bears, yoga mats, stickers, shirts, hats, you name it. We got it. Guys, thank you again so much for joining us. And we'll see you tomorrow on the Positively Pat Sims show. I am Positively Pat Sims, and you've been watching Honest Reviews. And this was our honest review of Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave us a comment. Give us a like. Tell us what you thought. Give us your scores, your recommendations for Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. All right, guys. I'll see you tomorrow. Take it easy. And if it's easy, take it twice. So long, everybody. Have a great rest of your night.
The lights are dim, but the room still hums with the echoes of laughter and the moments we spun. Every honest word is like a stone in a stream. It rippled, it lingered, it shaped our dream. And if you ever wonder where I'll be, look to the screen, I'll be there, you'll see. Goodbye to the faces that stayed in the glow. Goodbye to the voices I always know. This isn't an end, just a bend in the road. Goodbye for now, my friends, my show.